Hello and welcome to the Talking City podcast from the Manchester Evening News. I'm Tyrone Marshall in the host's chair today, joined by our chief City writer, Simon Bajkowski. Si, the dreaded first week of June podcast, probably the quietest week of the year, but I'm sure we're going to find something to talk about for the next half an hour or so.
Transfer window's open. Why haven't they signed anyone? Real Madrid have got Mbappe. Why haven't City signed anyone?
Losing ground. Be last 16 next year. The way things are going, disgrace. that is what you get on social media these days. We'll try and bring a bit more balance and nuance to it. But like you say, the transfer window isn't actually officially open. So I think it opens on June the 14th in the Premier League. But of course, they could be doing their deals and getting their ducks in a row. And I'm sure behind the scenes they are.
Do you know what? I don't know whether it's just me and I'm viewing everything through my lens and nobody else's, but I haven't yet seen any kind of panicking about needing urgency. I don't know if everyone's just fatigued after, it was a long, the treble season was amazing, but it was really, really long. And then this season, do we call it this or last season? Like, was still really, really
grey
long.
area, isn't it?
Yeah. But it's like, I think everyone's just kind of knackered and enjoying a bit of a rest.
Yeah. Well, it needs to happen as well, doesn't it? Given the next two seasons are basically one season again for City with that Club World Cup. So maybe they are putting their feet up, and well earned it is too. But even if they are having a little break from transfers, we are not. First off, we'll discuss a few issues, I guess, within the City squad in the first part. I mean, the obvious one to start off with is probably one we didn't really expect to see coming up in terms of that goalkeeper situation, and suddenly a lot of kind of unknowns there, and Ederson's interest from Al Ittihad, and we know now how City play it with players who want to leave, which essentially if they can go, then bring them a good offer and they'll go. And if Ederson wants to go, I'm pretty sure he's going to bring a good offer from Al Ittihad. It's going to be an interesting few weeks to see how that develops, isn't it? Especially the way Ortega played this season. Obviously, there was a mistake in the cup final, but we were both there. I don't think either of us felt it was really. Well, it was Ortega's fault, wasn't it? Rather than Guardiola. Yeah. He shouldn't have been out there, and was probably a bit nervy in the first half.
Yeah,
which throws another spanner in the works. So.
Yeah. If you're going to sort of make an amazing save in one competition and letting a goal in another, you'd probably rather win the Premier League. Yeah, I feel like the goalkeeping situation kind of sets the tone for City's summer. Some summers that City have had, they've had a very clear plan with transfers very early on. 2022, for instance, they'd agreed to sign Haaland by May. Phillips was snapped up at the end of June. I think they had like a signing unveiling in the first month of July with 4 players. So it was like that was all wrapped up and boxed off and everyone knew what was what. Last summer was kind of a lot more dependent on other things and sort of very unlike City. They had sort of a nibble at Declan Rice and then looked at Lucas Paqueta and then settled on Mateus Nunes late in the window. So I feel like this summer set up to be more like last summer, and the goalkeeping situation is indicative of that because Ederson, City have made it clear that Ederson is number one, but Ederson has had interest from elsewhere, a couple of clubs in the Saudi Pro League, but Al Ittihad are very keen to make him sort of a marquee. And, there are players in Saudi who can tell their former City teammates what it's like. And, it is an option for anyone who considers it. So City we're expecting that Stefan Ortega would leave this summer, but then he's played enough games that he said, no, at the minute I'm happy to stay. But if a good offer comes in for him, then if he gets offered a good contract, then he will probably push to leave. And you've also got Ederson who might push to leave. So there's a situation where City keep both. There's a situation where City keep one. And there's maybe even a situation where both push to leave and only one is allowed to leave, because City will sort of have accepted for a while that they might have to look at one goalkeeper. They won't accept losing two, I wouldn't have thought.
So you're saying there's a chance Scott Carson will be number one come August?
That's what we've all been waiting for.
I mean, in all seriousness, it is a slightly problematic situation, isn't it? It's not easy to sign a new number one that fits into how Guardiola wants to play, as we saw with Joe Hart, with Claudio Bravo, and eventually getting to Ederson, who was the perfect signing. If he goes, I mean, it needs to happen sooner rather than later, doesn't it? This can't really drag on into July, because if City need a new number one, they probably need to get moving on it pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I mean, Bravo seemed like an extreme example in Pep's first season, but that really did show how not having the right goalkeeper, or having the right goalkeeper but not in the right form, can just torpedo a season. So, I think City would think that if they started with either Ederson or Ortega in goal as their number one for the season, it would be fine. But yeah, you can't account for things like injuries and things like that, as we have seen this season. So they need two really strong goalkeepers for all of the competitions, because I think that's it as well. Like, Ederson's probably been kept as good as he's kept because he's not had to play the cup games. Like, he can mentally refresh kind of more than most players in the squad, and I think that kind of goes a bit under the radar, because it's really, really demanding mentally and physically, goalkeeping. So, yeah, it's one of those that, like you say, they won't want it to drag out, and may well set some kind of internal deadlines to make sure that it doesn't. But at the minute, it's more uncertain than they would like.
Yeah, and I mean, Ortega on his own is probably the sixth, seventh, eighth best goalkeeper in the Premier League, even as City's number two. And although he made a mistake on the cup final on a big stage, that's the only mistake I can think of this season. And he's played a lot, and every goalkeeper makes mistakes. So yeah, like I say, if Ederson goes, he would be a perfectly capable number one if required, you would think. But that probably plays into the narrative around this window at the moment for City, that a lot of it is about who goes rather than bringing players in. The first stage of the window almost feels like assessing the state of the squad and seeing who they need to replace. And to that end, it feels like a big summer for the midfield. We've been seeing a gradual rebuild of this midfield, I guess. It could accelerate this summer with potential departures all over the place. I mean, Calvin Phillips has been back at City for a while, and fair to say that loan spell did not go to plan. Matheus Nunes had a difficult first season at City. He will do the classic thing of pointing to players who've had difficult first seasons and have then improved. But although you could see why he was signed in terms of that dribbling ability and ability to take players out of the game, we never really saw it consistently enough. And so often when he plays, it just felt like he didn't really fit. He wasn't in rhythm with this team a lot of the time. I mean, what's the state of play with those two? What do you see happening with those two? Because there are a lot of question marks around that midfield this summer, aren't there?
Yeah, I think Phillips has kind of belatedly realised that he needs to move. Big step last summer to say, no, I'm staying, but then it was pretty obvious, even while the transfer window was still open, that he wouldn't get the opportunities, and so it proved, and so he moved to West Ham. He was linked to Everton last week. Everton are interested in a loan. I feel like Everton would be like a perfect move for him to try and.
He feels perfect for Everton, doesn't he? He feels like an Everton player at the moment somehow.
Yeah, although I was told that it was probably unlikely to happen, so you sort of think, oh, right, back to the drawing board. I think sort of City being determined to protect their value. I mean, they eked a loan fee out of West Ham, as well as some wages, and what a kind of deal that proved out to be, given how disastrous his West Ham loan went. But City are kind of in the position where they know they're very unlikely to get the 45 million back for him that they paid for him. But if they can get, a few million here and a few million there from loan fees, then that will help to bring the value back. So Phillips, has a very good team around him who should be able to find him a very good loan. If not a permanent deal, but I think loan's looking more likely just because you wouldn't be confident of paying a permanent fee. I don't think, given how the last 2 years have gone, or certainly a permanent fee that City would accept. Nunes is a more interesting one because he's only been at City a year. City don't tend to give up on players that have only been there a year, which is why it was kind of so striking that they did it with Phillips. However, Nunes is a Jorge Mendes client, and we know that Mendes has the ability in the market to move around several pieces of the puzzle to his liking. He's been, Nunes was cut from the Portugal squad in favour of two members from the Saudi Pro League, which doesn't reflect very well on him, but on the flip side does kind of tell him that if he were to move to the Saudi Pro League, it wouldn't be the end of his dreams of representing Portugal. And like Cristiano Ronaldo still getting in the squad somehow. Nunes is back in the Portugal squad now, I think, because of a late injury. So, on the plus side for him, he gets to be part of an international tournament. But on the other side, if any City player could have done with a full pre-season working with Guardiola in sort of a sparse squad, it's Nunes. So I would be surprised if they gave up on Nunes after just a year. But the way I could see it happening was if it was part of a sort of a wider puzzle.
And a lot of this plays into the idea of, just to look at incomings briefly, if Phillips does go, do they need someone else to fill that kind of support role for Rodri? It feels like filling this position has almost become like the equivalent of when Tottenham kept trying to sign strikers to play backup for Harry Kane, and that you just know that you're never going to play apart from the very odd game. But at the same time, as we saw last year, the drop-off when Rodri doesn't play is stark, and there is always the chance that an injury will happen. We saw 2 suspensions, I think it was, last year. He's complained publicly a lot about workload recently. They really need someone who can fill in for him, can't they? But that player has to accept that if he doesn't get injured, they're probably only going to get a few cup games and a few relatively low-key Premier League games.
Yeah, there was an interview that Soriano did in 2022. So that, really strong window that they had where he said we need a striker, Haaland, and we need a backup for Rodri. Now that was the year where they signed Calvin Phillips. If you're accepting that Phillips is gone, then you need a backup. Like even before you get to the point where, like you say, Rodri's been complaining about workload, and even Soriano this week or last week, talking about the Club World Cup, was saying, the schedule's in crisis and where do you go as players? So it feels like a Rodri backup is essential to City this window. And yeah, it does seem like, how do you bring a guy and say, right, you're going to play when this guy who always plays doesn't play? But they've managed to find a backup for Haaland. And, Kovacic came in last summer and has played games at 6 on his own. So it is possible. And I suppose you do it by, you say, you come, and if you're good enough, you'll stay in the team. We'll find a place for you wherever. Rico Lewis has seen himself as more of an 8. If you were to say to him, do you want to try and be a 6 and you'll get more game time as well as being right back? And that might sort of convince you that you can get the minutes you want at City this season, maybe. But they just need to sign another body, because we kind of saw last season, as good as Rodri was, he had a bit of a wobble in a very important part of the season. And that is not where City want him to be.
No, absolutely, and he needs protecting for the back end of the season, doesn't he? For those key games, and probably was played too much this year. I mean, looking a bit further ahead on the pitch, I guess the other two players with big question marks over their future at the moment are De Bruyne and Bernardo. Every summer we have that question with Bernardo. It's no secret now. He's wanted a new challenge since he was about 15. It feels like it's been going on for so long. And obviously, I mean, De Bruyne's second half of the season was immensely confusing in many ways, wasn't it? And that his stats were absolutely incredible, but it felt he wasn't influencing big games to the level he used to do. And the cup final was probably evidence of that. I mean, what do we see happening with those two this year? Is it going to be another case of almost wait and see with both, and especially with Bernardo, because we know he would be willing to leave? It's just the clubs he wants to go to essentially cannot afford him, can they?
Yeah, that is the strange old paradox. The Bernardo Silva paradox is that sort of the more he plays, the more unaffordable he is, and talk of like a release clause in his contract that means he can go for 50 million this summer. And you think, oh great, right, this will be the year that he goes, and then it comes round and so who's paying 50 million for him? And it's not that he's not worth 50 million, because he is, but just the state of the clubs that want him. It seems very unlikely that Barcelona will be able to find that sort of money. And he's a strange old player, isn't he? Because he's kind of invaluable to City, but at the same time, he's almost like a luxury player. Like, he is like the heart of industry in the City team, and he buzzes around everywhere. But if Barcelona were to sign him, where would they play him? Would they play him right wing? Would they play him central? Like, would they play him a bit further back or further forward? It's obviously he could fulfill any of those roles, but it's a bit of a harder sell to be like, I'm going to spend 50 million on this guy and he's going to play wherever. I mean, PSG have been the sort of the most serious bidder for him in recent years, but not hearing much about them being prepared to stump up 50 million for him this summer. So it's kind of looking like another season, another summer where Bernardo Silva stays despite being open to a new challenge. So maybe he's going to stay at City until he's 33 and then go directly to Benfica.
Yeah, it's starting to look that way. And I mean, as much as he wants a new challenge, it doesn't feel like PSG is that challenge at the moment when they've just lost their best player, maybe their only marquee player. I mean, are you really getting more at PSG out of than you are at City? And I know there's the attraction of moving ever so slightly back towards Portugal and Spain in the better weather. But it's not that much better in Paris. So I'm not sure that's really the move that he had. Well, we all know the move he's got his heart set on, don't we? But like you say, it's not really financially doable for Barcelona at the moment. Right, that's all for the first part of the Talking City podcast. We'll be back after this short break. Welcome back to the Talking City podcast. We are expecting at some point this week the annual chairman's interview to drop on the City website. I'm sure there'll be some more interesting tidbits from Khaldoon Al-Mubarak to come this week, but I think the section we will all be looking at closely is going to be that on the manager's future. I don't know, would you call it mixed messages from Guardiola and over the last few weeks in terms of what's going to happen. I think there was plenty of confusion after the title over exactly when he was talking about leaving, and was he hinting at going now? Was he hinting at even signing a new contract? This is what you tend to get with Guardiola's English sometimes, isn't it? You can easily kind of read two things into the same message, and I think there was a lot of that happening then. So it's going to be interesting to see what the chairman has to say about the manager's future.
Yeah, I think sort of as has been clarified post-season, people expect him to leave at the end of his contract in 2025. And even if, that hadn't been the case, it remains the case that he's 12 months out from from finishing his contract. So if you are the chairman of a football club, you sort of should want to get that sorted or expect to be asked about, what's happening with that and when anything might go down. I mean, you would expect, as in previous times where he signed a contract extension, that Calhoun and people would, sit down with Pep later in the year, maybe October, November, and it's obvious that City would like him to stay again and again and again and stay for as long as possible. But they also know that he, does have other things that he wants to do, and he can only keep going for so long. And it's sort of unexpected that he's been going for as long as he has, to everyone, himself included. So, but I would expect that to be the main talking points come out of the chairman's interview this week. And then also you would also expect him to have something to say on transfers and the transfer market, because City are sort of at a position again where it's kind of like, do they go for a rebuild? Do they just kind of tick on as they are and maybe lose one and bring one in? What are they looking to do this summer? Because they have to be thinking forward anyway, but they also have to be thinking beyond Guardiola and maybe even beyond Cheeky Begiristain. So there are some big things coming up, and they have to be in the position to sort them.
And I guess, going on to Guardiola's future again, that there's a chance that this could dominate the narrative and the agenda at times this season. He's obviously not going to want to announce now, I don't think, that he's going. It's going to be something that is probably communicated if that is the decision as the season goes on. But the longer it goes on, the more the questions around it are going to intensify over what's going to happen. And then you've also got the issue that his contract actually expires midway through a tournament next year in terms of the Club World Cup. So I don't know whether they're going to have he's doing the group stages and someone else is doing the knockouts. But it is going to be it's strange timing, and it is going to be a subject that I say has the danger to. I mean, it could dominate the agenda this season without having any real knock-on effect on the pitch. But it is going to be something that is going to crop up again and again during the season, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, on the Club World Cup, you would think that Guardiola would see that as kind of like a perfect farewell, like the expanded Club World Cup and the chance to be world champions again. However, if he were to leave at the end of the Club World Cup, it would leave the new manager with like less than 3 weeks to sort of get a look at this squad that will be expected to win the Premier League and the Champions League again. So sort of what's good for Guardiola might not be good for City. Could it be that if he does decide to leave next season and wants to do the Club World Cup, that they have both him and his successor in place in America and sort of have a managerial double act until, one passing the baton to the other quite literally. I don't know, but these are all kind of things that City will have to take in mind. But yeah, I know sort of back in 2019, I think, when he was coming into the was it 2019? 2020. He was out of contract in 2021 and he let his contract run into November 2020, and it was a theme in the opening months of the season. It was like, are people distracted by the fact that you haven't signed up? And it seemed kind of, that you're just going to get those questions asked, even if you're doing relatively well in the league. And then he signed his new deal in November, and they went to Tottenham away the next game and lost 2-0. And it was all kind of like, oh, right. And then went on a world record beating unbeaten run, and won the title and got to the Champions League final, and et cetera, et cetera. So, these things can make a difference. It's hard to say in it, really. Like, whenever a manager decides that they're going to go, or decides to announce that they're going to go, they are whether that is a good decision or not is defined solely by the results, isn't it?
What happens? Yeah.
you've got like Ferguson, Klopp, even Pellegrini. Like, was it good to announce? Did you win the league? No, then it wasn't. No. So
Yeah,
it's hard.
it is, and you cannot keep it secret, can you? If Guardiola decides to go, then City are going to be approaching managers fairly early on from when that happens, and you just cannot keep these things secret. And like we say, that the Club World Cup is a fairly sizable obstacle to overcome in terms of what happens and that handover. And maybe that'll be quite the press release when City announced Guardiola has signed a new contract. Small print, it's for 2 weeks to the middle of July to see us through to the Club World Cup. So yeah, like you say, it's in a way, it's not a great summer for him to leave, and he's obviously got an affinity with City. Maybe he looks at that and thinks, I'll do one more year just to make the handover easier. But at the same time, like we say, we didn't expect him to be here this long. He's got other things he wants to do, and he has clearly been talking ever since kind of the Club World Cup in more finite terms, hasn't he, about an end of an era, and we've sensed kind of a change in his tone about what things they've won. And I've always said when you start talking like that, it can be easy to convince yourself that it is kind of time, but who knows? Maybe he'll change his mind. But like we say, it's going to be a topic that bubbles away all this summer and all season. And this is an international summer as well. Plenty of City's players jetting off to play in tournaments, the Euro 2024, Copa America, possibly the Olympics. Jack Grealish, uncertain to make the England squad heading into last night, came off the bench in the friendly win against Bosnia and set up one goal, helped set up another. A pretty lively cameo off the bench and a performance that was badly needed, really, in terms of Grealish wanting to make that Euro squad, because it did feel like his place was in danger, and it does feel like he's never really been a mainstay in a Southgate team, has he? He's kind of been peripheral at tournaments he has gone to. He needed this, and I think it's the Iceland friendly on Friday. He needed a couple of big performances, and even though when he came off the bench last night, he did deliver, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. People are still saying like, "Oh, he needs to get back to playing how he played for Villa if he wants to be in the England squad." You think, "Oh yeah, back when he was at Villa, is that when Southgate never picked him?" And there was the whole international tournament where everyone was crying out for Grealish, and Southgate never picked him. Um, yeah, I mean, there was a lot of anger from Villa fans when he left for City in 2021, and he has done what he wanted to do in terms of win Premier League trophies, win Champions League trophies, but the bare facts of it are that he's had one good season out of three now. He was really important in the run to win the treble, but he didn't recover. He couldn't rediscover his form last season, and injuries didn't help. But he struggled to reach his best again, and that means that he's had one season out of three. And fine, if City are going to say, it's fine, we back you to rediscover your best next season, but having sort of been out the team and not played much of a role in winning this last Premier League for City, he's now at risk of not being part of England's bid to win the Euros because of it. I still think I would take him. I still think he brings a lot to any team. And yeah, I sort of winced a bit when he was left out the starting 11 last night. But then maybe it was kind of Southgate giving the players on the real fringes a start to see what they could do. But it did feel important that he came on and made an impact. And I think he will be looking to make an impact on Friday. Have they got to decide the squad by close of play on Friday, or what's the...
Yeah, so I think they're playing Iceland on Friday night and then maybe
Yeah.
confirming the squad after that. I don't know if
Afterwards.
it's just
Right.
done by midnight or something. It's obviously going to be on a late night for those on England duty. But yeah, and I mean, there's quite a lot of probably selection dilemmas because a lot of players who are on the fringes last night did pretty well. I mean, you look at potentially, I know Grealish plays on the left. Eze started a lot on the left last night. He could be a rival. He was excellent in the first half. So it did feel like a game last night where a lot of those who maybe are on the fringes, who might have been 24th, 25th, 26th, 28th, 29th, whatever in the squad, played pretty well. So some difficult decisions to make. And like we say, I still don't think it's a guarantee that Grealish makes that final cut at the moment.
Yeah, I thought Southgate's comments were really interesting because he was sort of talking about, oh, no one's decided, and we keep having this discussion among ourselves, like, what if so and so got injured? What if so and so got injured? And there is this, well, no one's sure, are they? Because it's the whole Foden Bellingham debate. Do you trust Foden, Bellingham, and Rice to be your midfield three, or do you decide that you need more cover alongside Rice, as Southgate has had forever? In which case, Foden shifts out wide. And again, Foden shifts out wide. It's not good for Grealish because then Grealish isn't in the team. And, can Foden do what Grealish would, but better? And therefore, you don't need Grealish. So, competition for places in that, in those areas, seeing like the likes of Marcus Rashford not even considered. And that's not to say that that's unfair, but it's, someone who has been very good in the past, hasn't had the best season, and just hasn't been picked. So the precedent is there. Grealish has just kind of got to hope that he's got enough credit in the bank. Because he did get credit in the bank when he moved to City and improved his defensive work. That was what Southgate liked. But yeah, it's a big call for Southgate, and Grealish needs to be in that squad because I don't think it would be great for him if he was forced to spend the summer just sitting watching it.
No, definitely not. Probably not great for him either if he's forced to spend the summer sitting watching it from Ibiza.
Yeah.
And another player who's got at least one international tournament this summer and possibly two is Julian Alvarez, who'll be going with Argentina to the Copa America. And City are going to let him play in the Olympics as well. I'm not sure the Olympic squad's been confirmed yet, but there's been a lot of talk that he will be one of the overage players, I think, in Javier Mascherano's squad. So, I mean, that's a really busy summer, isn't it? The Olympics are always a bit of an unknown for players. Obviously, a lot of countries take it very seriously and want some of their A-listers there. But it does mean that Alvarez is going to have a really busy summer. I'm not sure of the exact schedule, but potential there for, 10, 12, 14 games across maybe a couple of 2-month period and very little rest. So it's going to have a knock-on effect going into next season if he does play both of those tournaments, isn't it?
Yeah, I did like Thierry Henry's comment this week after picking his France squad for the Olympics that he's not had as many rejections since high school. I think he very much wanted and was expecting Kylian Mbappe to be one of the star names in his squad, and I think Real Madrid have said thank you very much, but no.
Yeah, he'll be coming with us on tour.
I think he's only named 2 overage players in his France squad, so maybe he's still hoping for a late call, but it's not ideal for them. So I think Alvarez is going to go. I think he wants to go, and City are going to let him go. The final of the Olympics, you would expect Argentina to do very well. The final is the day before the Community Shield, so it's kind of like a dummy run for the Club World Cup next season. Like, when on earth are you going to give players 2 or 3 weeks off? 3 to 4, really, ideally. Does it mean that Alvarez essentially misses August for City? And you sort of kind of have to accept that that's the case, really. Like, Pep knows how big a deal the Olympics are. When he came in at Barcelona, he let Messi go for Argentina, and he won Olympic gold. And his right hand man at City is an Olympic gold champion at water polo. So he does get that it's a big deal, but it's hard to see how Alvarez either hits the ground running or doesn't end up hitting the deck in about November if he doesn't have some kind of prolonged break. But he's not going to get any kind of break in the summer if he's at the Copa and then the Olympics.
No, definitely, it's going to be a very busy summer for him, and for those City players who don't go on international duty, it'll be pre-season tour time in America. I'm sure a few who do will join up. Some stragglers who maybe knocked out early of tournaments as well. And talking of the tour, City looking to go big in America, looking to conquer stateside, and to that end, they have they've stamped their foot in New York. They've made a play for the Big Apple.
Yeah, opened a store over the weekend at the Rockefeller Center, which is like iconic New York landmark territory. They've just been growing in America over the last few years, and signing Haaland was huge. For a country where maybe certainly a lot more than England, fans follow individuals over teams. So signing Haaland, and then they went to the US for that 22 summer tour, and just like the response was enormous, and continued to grow. I think the home game with Arsenal this season was the most watched Premier League game in the US, and they saw like over 40% of sales online from the US last season. So they're just looking to capitalize is all you can say. They're looking to, we're coming out here in July, but what can we do around July? What can we do in June? I think the store in New York is open between June and September. So it is only a pop-up, I think, but it's really looking to sort of go around the tour event. And City, of course, are in New York for their tour. They're playing at Yankee Stadium, so I'm sure there will be some player sightings in the shop during that time, or something like that. So yeah, they're looking to make as big an impact as possible and make as much money off the tour, because as we've seen with kind of Tottenham and Newcastle flying out to Australia the day after the season ended, every £1 million can count in the final reckoning.
Absolutely, and it's the type of commercially shrewd thing we've seen City do a lot of in recent years. Right, that's all for today. 37 minutes there, a phenomenal effort for the first week of June. Thank you very much, Si.
Yeah, pleasure.
And thank you to the listeners. Give us a review. Please leave a like, subscribe, and we'll be joining you throughout the summer for all your latest Man City updates from the Talking City podcast.